There's a problem with the term gamification. For some, it means only points, badges, and leaderboards and nothing else. For others, it only means serious games, so programs that are legit games built for some purpose other than entertainment. Depending on who you ask, it means pointsification, badgification, rewards, serious games, game-based training, gameful design. So yeah, it's a bit of a mess. So in this video, I'm going to map some of these concepts in relation to one another, and we'll see if we can't make some useful sense out of all this chaos. Generally, the official definition is that gamification is the application of game elements to non-game contexts. That or some variation on that is the most common definition out there. And it's a terrible definition. I mean, what counts as a game element? Is pixel art a game element? If I apply it to a non-game context, can I call that gamified now? Okay, so pixel art is just a surface element, but what if I give you a badge for watching this video? Is this video now gamified? Well, according to this definition, maybe. There's no question that the definition is too broad and open to interpretation. The result is that sadly, when you hear someone say gamification, you don't know if they mean you'll get a t-shirt at the end of their course, or if the course has been designed as a series of fun challenges to help the learner work through and master the content. So the term is applied to effective programs that really leverage game mechanics and increase learning outcomes, but it's also applied to programs that only mimic games but don't actually impact learner engagement and skill building. And that's why this matters. If you're gamifying a training program, you're probably hoping to have a positive impact on learning outcomes, more skill building, more knowledge acquired, longer lasting results. So ideally, the term you use should say something about whether or not you're likely to get that kind of impact. So with that goal in mind, let's dive right in, starting with plain old games. Imagine that this is the entire world of games, from Call of Duty to bowling to rock, paper, scissors. People have notoriously struggled to define what games are, but we all know it when we see it. Among the definitions I've seen, the most useful elements are that games are a limited set of defined rules within which players will perform actions towards specific goals, which they may or may not reach. So games have uncertain outcomes, and that uncertainty is really important. It's what leads to engagement. Uncertainty means suspense. If you're sure your team's going to win because they're up 7-1 in the last few seconds of the third period, that's not super exciting. But if it's a very close game, that's when your uncertainty goes up and you're on the edge of your seat. So uncertainty increases engagement. Now let's take a second to consider where that uncertainty comes from. In a game, you're performing actions towards some goal, but you're not sure you're going to reach it because your actions are not the only determining factor. Maybe you have a great chess strategy, but your opponent is a master and they're blocking everything you try. Or maybe Donkey Kong's throwing barrels at your face. Or if you're playing roulette, then it's chance that's going to determine whether your actions, in this case your bet, was successful. And sometimes you do control everything, like in darts or bowling or golfing. But the task is so challenging that you can't be sure you're going to have perfect execution 100% of the time. All of these things are sources of uncertainty in games. And so that interaction between your actions and something else means the outcomes are uncertain. And that uncertainty makes the game interesting, suspenseful, and challenging. Now, most of the time people play games for fun, but there is a subset of games that is designed for a purpose other than entertainment. These are the serious games. So this boundary between serious games and other games is concerned with the game's purpose, whether it's for entertainment or for something else. If it's for something other than entertainment, then it's a serious game. And in this category, you'll find games for advertising, attitude change, positive habit forming, therapy, and of course, our beloved training games. And since these programs fall into the category of games, let's call that game-based training. Of course, all games will teach you something, but here I'm talking about the games that are primarily designed for that purpose. So where does that leave gamification? Where does gamification of training sit in this universe? Well, it sits over here and it covers training games, but also programs that are not games in the strictest sense, but that use game elements to boost their effectiveness. Both fall under the umbrella of gamification. Now, before you start writing in all caps in the comments, hear me out. Some programs use a lot of game elements and others just a few, so there's a spectrum here, and the boundary at the edge between very little gamified and not gamified at all gets kind of fuzzy. And that's where I think we get into trouble. That's where we end up applying the label of gamification to things that only look like games, but actually have very little chance of changing behavior and improving learning outcomes. So where should we draw this line? This is where I think we need a stronger criterion than just saying the application of game elements. If we think about what makes a game engaging, then the line should be drawn at the use of game mechanics. That is, something that acts on that fundamental interaction between the player and the program. The program itself doesn't need to be a bona fide game. It doesn't need to tick all the boxes of what a game is in order to be gamified, but the mechanics that are applied in it should act on that important interaction, either by modifying the player's range of actions, or broadening the goals, or changing the way the program reacts. Let me give you an example. Leaderboards are kind of an edge case. They compare performance on an activity, but they don't change the activity itself. They don't really modify the interaction. Or do they? If I have a puzzle that I'm positive I can solve, that's certainty of outcome. But add a leaderboard to it and you haven't changed my relationship with the puzzle, I'm still sure I can solve it, but I'm not sure I can solve it faster than you or in fewer steps. So you've broadened my goals. Now it's not only about solving the puzzle, but it's also about how well I'm going to solve it compared to others. You now have a richer way of measuring my performance, and I now have some uncertainty about it. Now I don't know where I'm going to end up on the leaderboard, so I'm likely to pay more attention. That's going to impact my engagement. So yes, leaderboards would fall into the category of gamification. On the other hand, a program that only takes on the look and sound of a game but doesn't change the interaction or broaden the goals is not a game mechanics and should be left outside the definition of gamification. Now, it's not wrong to use the superficial elements of games, the elements that don't impact the interaction. We do it all the time for aesthetics, user comfort, legibility, etc. But they are no substitute for the interaction between player and game, between learner and content. And so, if you're using only the superficial elements of games, you have to have the right expectation about what impact those elements really can have on learner motivation and cognitive engagement, if any. Because if I'm only using the surface elements of games and calling my program gamified, then it's almost like I'm promising the engagement that comes from games without actually using the mechanics that make games engaging in the first place. Bottom line is, games are engaging because of that interaction and the uncertainty of outcome that arises from it. And when we gamify training, we're harnessing that engagement and channeling it towards learning. So it makes sense to use the mechanics from games that actually give rise to that engagement. And that's what should be called gamification. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. You've probably heard it defined as the application of game elephants.